Hey everyone, and welcome back to the getwellbe podcast. This podcast is designed to help you learn, expand what you thought was possible, and become as empowered as you can be in your health. Here we are in December. With the end of the year comes a lot of things, but this year it may mean holiday parties, so this episode is all about alcohol, which is a pretty heated topic in the health and wellness world. Real quick before we jump in, if you haven't done so already and love the getwellbe podcast, please write a quick review right now by scrolling to the bottom of our podcast page in your podcast app and clicking write a review, then giving a few words and a few stars, and then pressing send. It makes such a huge difference and is really appreciated. Now on to the topic at hand. Recent research has shown the negative effects of alcohol, including its effect on heartburn and acid reflux. And we now know if a pregnant woman has even a tiny amount, it can impact a fetus with long-term consequences. But we also know that it's been a central part of human gatherings for thousands of years, and it's a treasured pleasure for many all over the world. So, is there such a thing as healthier alcohol consumption? We dug into it and laid out all the information for you in this guide, including what alcohol does to your body, the healthiest and least healthy alcohols to drink, and a deep dive on organic wine, and some personal real talk on my own drinking habits. Before we get into the negative effects of alcohol, let's take a step back to explain what exactly happens when you drink alcohol. Here's a step-by-step breakdown of what alcohol does to your body. First, you take a sip. The sip immediately moves into the small blood vessels on your mouth and tongue. The alcohol moves down your esophagus and passes into your stomach. If there's food in your stomach, the alcohol remains there for some time, and a portion of it is broken down by an enzyme before passing into your bloodstream. The remaining alcohol, usually around 75% or more if your stomach was empty, then passes into your small intestine. From there, it's absorbed into your bloodstream. Once the alcohol is in your blood, it circulates throughout your entire body, reaching your brain within 5 minutes. Within 10 minutes, you'll notice the effects of alcohol, such as lowered inhibition, trouble concentrating, relaxation, slowed thinking, and flushed skin. After about 20 minutes, your liver will begin to break it down. The liver is responsible for filtering 80 to 90% of the alcohol you consume, and it can break down alcohol at a rate of about 1 drink per hour. This rate can vary depending on your size, age, sex, and liver health. The alcohol not filtered by your liver goes into your kidneys, which are responsible for balancing the amount of fluid in your body and removing waste through urine, which explains why drinking alcohol can make you need to pee more than drinking other liquids does. 2 enzymes help metabolize alcohol. The first is ADH and then ALDH. In a 2-step process, they convert the alcohol into water and carbon dioxide, which makes it easier to eliminate. So now that you know the biology and physiology of what it does, let's talk about the negative effects. First, it must be said, alcohol is a toxin. And like any toxin, it can have negative effects on your body. These include heart issues such as irregular heartbeat and stretching or drooping of the heart muscle, increased risk of stroke, high blood pressure, liver issues such as cirrhosis, which is irreversible scarring of the liver and loss of liver cells, increased risk of pancreatitis, a dangerous swelling of the pancreas that prevents proper digestion, increased risk of various cancers, including liver cancer, breast cancer, colorectal cancer, and throat cancer, too much or too little sugar in the blood because alcohol damages the pancreas, which regulates the body's insulin use and response to glucose, and then changes and damage to brain structure that lead to difficulty forming long and short-term memories. For a long time, the conventional wisdom has been that alcohol in moderation is fine or even good for you. For instance, red wine has long been linked to better heart health, and moderate alcohol consumption has been associated with a lower risk of Alzheimer's. However, recent research has emerged suggesting that any amount of alcohol increases your disease risk. And an independent scientific committee advised the USDA to reduce the recommended maximum number of alcoholic drinks per day from 2 to 1. The USDA ignored the recommendation, but that's a topic for another time. So which is it? How can people who live the longest without chronic disease, aka people who live in areas known as the blue zones, which are 5 places around the world where people live the longest, drink alcohol at the same time that we see so much research showing any amount of alcohol is bad for us? Is there such a thing as healthy alcohol consumption or not? Well, it depends. And the 2 biggest determining factors are what else you've got going on in your body and the frequency, reason, quality/type, and amount of alcohol that you drink. To better explain the first factor, we'll borrow the bucket analogy that Dr. Brooke Kalanick used when I interviewed her about histamine. She was explaining the idea of histamine tolerance and said, think of your body as a bucket. And when the bucket overflows, that's when health issues begin. If your bucket's pretty empty, putting in a bit of alcohol won't necessarily result in health issues. But if you're already reaching the brim, then alcohol could push you over the brim. How full your particular bucket is depends on what else is going on with you. Is your body dealing with a leaky gut, a food allergy, some environmental toxicity? If your body is already working overtime trying to empty your bucket, it will have a much more difficult time processing alcohol than someone who has good gut health, a strong immune system, no chronic health issues, and low exposure to other toxins. With the second factor, it makes sense, right, that someone who drinks nightly will be more likely to have health issues compared to someone who drinks a few times a year. It also makes sense that someone who consumes 5 drinks a night is more likely to have health issues than someone who consumes 1 drink a night. The reason you're drinking also plays a big role in how it impacts your health. The Blue Zones have shown us that drinking is part of gathering with your community, and it's clear that sharing time with loved ones is healthier than drinking alone or drinking as a coping mechanism. Less known is the impact of the quality and type of alcohol. Just as a factory farm egg is not the same as a pasture-raised egg, a glass of wine from an organic vineyard is not the same as a mass-produced bottle of conventional wine. But I'll get more into details about that in a few minutes. Okay, so are some types of alcohol healthier than others? You bet. First up, wine. Wine drinkers live longer than people who drink other forms of alcohol. Red wine in particular has been associated with a ton of health benefits, including lower blood pressure and reduced risk of heart disease, diabetes, and several types of cancer. These health benefits likely derive from red wine's high content of resveratrol, a powerful antioxidant. But before you pop the cork on another bottle, know that wine also has some health drawbacks. First, as Wellbe expert Dr. Jonathan Aviv explains, it's highly acidic. White wine is slightly more acidic than red, and can cause your sinuses to swell and trigger an allergic response. Second, many wines contain added sugar that can cause inflammation. You can mitigate this by choosing dry wines, which have less sugar, and making sure to choose organic, which I'll explain more in a minute. Lastly, remember that because wine comes from grapes, it's definitely a higher sugar content than other alcohols, even though wine drinkers tend to be healthier than people that drink other alcohols, and I'll explain more about this in a second. Next up, we have whiskey. I'm very sorry, whiskey lovers. At a time in my life, I really loved whiskey, but when it comes to straight booze, brown liquors can have more negative health effects than clear ones. Whiskey, which is bourbon, rye, rum, and other dark spirits, have been known to cause some pretty killer hangovers, potentially due to tannins and additives and other compounds that leach from wooden casks during aging. But that doesn't mean you're in the clear if you go with clear liquors. They may be a better choice overall, but not all clear spirits are created equal. Mezcal, one of our favorite spirits, is an ultra-pure tequila required by law to be 100% agave. When you opt for single-ingredient liquor, just like one-ingredient foods, such as an apple, there's less chance of chemicals and other harmful additives. Mezcal is also made through fermentation, which means it can promote healthy digestion because it introduces more good bacteria into your gut. Next up is tequila. So while mezcal is legally required to be 100% agave, up to 49% of a bottle of tequila can contain fillers such as corn, grain, sulfates, and artificial colors and flavors. If you're a tequila lover, just look for 100% agave on the label and you should be good. Better yet, look for the organic label. Tequila that's 100% agave also has some health benefits, including improved digestion because of that fermentation and lower LDL cholesterol levels. Next up, we have vodka. Vodka may increase blood flow to the heart and HDL, which is good cholesterol, but be forewarned. Most vodka is grain-based, and so it contains gluten, which is problematic for those with celiac disease and can cause inflammation even for those with undiagnosed gluten sensitivity. And let's be honest, many of us have that. When we drink vodka, we're choosing brands like Crop Organic, which is both USDA organic and certified gluten-free. If you can't find an organic vodka, Tito's is also gluten-free. Next up, we have beer. We'll be right back after this quick message. I don't know about you, but I never listen to the end of a podcast anymore, so I'm hopping in here to let you know that the best way to stay empowered and on top of your health is to be in the WellBe community. So head to getwellbe.com/subscribe to make sure you're in like Flynn. On getwellbe.com, you'll learn more about my online programs to help you go deeper and make life-altering changes to your health and our awesome non-toxic product database. If you're more of a social media person, let's be friends on Instagram. Find me at getwellbe. Okay, now back to beer. While beer can contain potassium and B vitamins and increase good cholesterol, the benefits are pretty insignificant when compared to beer's high carb and high calorie content. Plus, if you're sensitive to gluten, the malted barley in beer can make your immune system attack the lining of your small intestine. So what's the verdict when it comes to the healthiest alcohol? A good rule of thumb is the more pure something is, the healthier it is for you. That means that single ingredient alcohols like 100% agave tequila or wine made just from organic grapes, meaning sugar-free or sulfite-free without anything else added, are generally better for you than alcohol that comes from several ingredients. So we've covered the booze part, but what about the things you add to the booze? If you're drinking mezcal, which we consider to be the healthiest liquor, does that mean it's okay to add a sugary margarita mix? As I'm sure you can guess, the answer is no. After all, what you mix with your drink is going into your body and needs to be broken down by your liver too. In general, try to drink your liquor straight, on ice, or mixed with filtered water or seltzer or club soda. Cocktails often contain syrups, juices, and other high-calorie, high-sugar, low-nutrient mixers. For example, the average vodka cranberry has almost 8 teaspoons of sugar. All this added sugar is especially bad in cocktail form because the sugar makes extra work for your liver, which is already hard at work breaking down the alcohol. So think back to that bucket analogy, right? We want to keep that bucket as low as we can. Plus, these sweet drinks mask the sharp flavor of alcohol, and so they're very easy to drink, meaning you'll probably throw back more than you mean to, and more than you would if you were sipping something simpler. Unfortunately, those sugar-free or low-cal flavored seltzers are pretty terrible for you. They likely contain natural flavors, which is a category that includes an estimated 3,000 chemical food additives. The FDA does not require drink manufacturers to disclose what these food additives are, so we try to steer clear of anything that has natural flavors listed in the ingredients. All right, now circling back to wine, it's incredibly important to get organic wine. Why? Think about it. Alcohol already does a number on your body, so you don't want a whole bunch of extra toxins in the form of chemicals, preservatives, added sugar, and fillers to deal with when you drink. But with conventionally grown wine, that's just what you're getting. First of all, the primary ingredient in wine is grapes, as you know, and grapes are number 6 on the Environmental Working Group's Dirty Dozen list of produce with the highest load of pesticide residue. This is pretty scary since pesticides have been linked to a long list of health issues, including allergies, brain and nervous system toxicity, cancer, and hormonal disruption. Not to mention the 10 to 20,000 farm workers who may be poisoned by pesticides each year. After all, pesticides are meant to kill living beings, aka the pests, so it shouldn't be surprising that they also cause harm to humans. When you're drinking a bottle of wine, you're essentially drinking concentrated levels of these pesticides, so it's even more dangerous than if you were just eating a couple of grapes. Synthetic fertilizers, for their part, leach from the grape growing fields into waterways where they wreak havoc. Excessive nitrogen from the fertilizers can lead to elevated toxins and bacterial growth in water, which can then make us sick through tainted fish or contaminated water. Fertilizers also contain nitrate, and excessive nitrate in water has been linked to a higher risk for thyroid, bladder, and ovarian cancer. So while this stuff has implications for the health of people who drink the wine, it sure does also have negative health effects on countless others in the area where that wine is being grown. Most conventional wines also contain added sulfites. Sulfites are chemical compounds made up of sulfur and oxygen, and they're essentially a preservative as they can help prevent oxidation and thus let wine stay on the shelf longer. But health-wise, they have their own consequences. They can irritate the respiratory tract and cause an allergic reaction for some people, especially those with asthma, and can cause headaches and trigger or worsen migraines. They've also been associated with hives, stomach pain, and diarrhea. While you can find sulfite-free wine that isn't organic, all organic wines are required to contain no added sulfites. A small level of sulfites are naturally present due to the fermentation process. So your liver has to work hard to filter out the alcohol from your blood. Why also make it filter out chemical fertilizers, pesticides, and sulfite preservatives? When you give your liver too much to filter, it takes away from its other vital functions, which is making bile to digest food, storing energy and nutrients, and manufacturing your hormones, proteins, and enzymes that your body uses to function and ward off disease. So your liver is so critical. You do not want to overload it. Choosing organic wine gives your liver less work to do, which means it'll filter wine better, which, you guessed it, means you won't feel as bad and your body will be better off in the long and short term. The USDA regulates organic wine made and sold in the US, and any wine bearing the USDA organic label must be made with organic grapes grown without synthetic fertilizers, produced without genetic engineering or prohibited substances such as synthetic pesticides, made with certified organic agricultural ingredients, and certified sulfite-free wine. Again, naturally occurring sulfites are okay. Another phrase you might see on labels is made with organic grapes. Wines bearing this label aren't as healthy as organic wine brands that fit the criteria I described just now, because made with organic grapes just prohibits synthetic fertilizers and pesticides from the grape growing process, but not the wine production. Still, these wines are definitely better for you than conventional wine. In terms of taste, don't worry, you're not sacrificing any flavor by only going for organic wine brands. In fact, a 2016 analysis of blind taste test expert ratings of over 74,000 wines showed that eco-certified wines, a designation that includes organic wine, wine made with organic grapes, and biodynamic wine, which I'll describe in a second, was rated higher than regular wines. While you're sold on the benefits of drinking organic wine, unfortunately, the rest of the world really hasn't gotten on board yet, and that's usually because of cost. That means it's not always easy to find organic wine brands at the store you usually go to or at restaurants. Fortunately, there are a number of high-quality, WellBe endorsed sources where you're guaranteed to find some of the best organic wine around and for good prices that rival conventional wines. You'll find that list on the written version of this episode, which is in the show notes. All right, now what about biodynamic wine? When you talk about the best organic wine, you're bound to hear the word biodynamic. And even if you haven't been looking for organic wine, you've probably encountered the term. While it can still be tough to find organic wine brands at restaurants or bars, biodynamic wines have become trendy in recent years. The term biodynamic refers to an alternative agricultural approach that's very similar to organic farming, but also contains various other spiritual, mythical, and mystical elements. One of the main tenets of biodynamic agriculture is the idea that everything is interrelated. The soil, crops, trees, air, animals, and so on are all part of one single system. Some methods of biodynamic agriculture also rely on the lunar or astrological calendars to inform when they plant crops, and others may use more mystical, magical techniques like burying quartz stuffed into the horn of a cow to harvest cosmic forces in the soil. Mystical elements aside, biodynamic wine is a good choice when it comes to your health because it adheres to the same rules as organic wine. That means that no synthetic fertilizers or pesticides are used during either the growing of the grapes or the wine production process, and they're sulfite-free. Whether you believe in harvesting cosmic forces or not is your call. Speaking of sulfites, in order to carry the USDA organic label, a wine can't contain any added sulfites, but that doesn't mean that they're completely sulfite-free. That's because even organic wine brands have a small amount naturally occurring, which isn't generally a problem for most people. However, those with asthma or migraines, or who just want an extra layer of purity, might want to know how to remove sulfites from wine. So I've got 2 tips for you. 1, decant your wine. Using a wine decanter is a classic and simple way to lower the sulfite levels. When you pour from the bottle to the decanter, it becomes aerated and releases compounds including aromatic elements, alcohol, and sulfites. As soon as the wine is put in the decanter, the evaporation process begins, and the sulfites evaporate the fastest. Next, use a special filter. One of the simplest and most popular ways to remove sulfites from wine is a filter. I love one called the Ulo, which is a small gadget that sits on top of your glass and filters the wine as you pour it in. It has the added bonus of also aerating the wine, which lets more flavor come through. All right, now for some real talk. Should you drink? Is there room for alcohol in a holistic, non-toxic lifestyle? Just like eating meat, you're going to have evangelists on both sides saying you absolutely should, and others that say you absolutely should not, and both have research to support their positions. Well, I'm here to tell you that like most things in life, the answer exists in the gray for all the reasons I spoke about in this episode. Some people really shouldn't drink at all. Some people can drink more than they should and be okay. But for most of us, we have to know what's really going on in our bodies, otherwise, to know if we can drink. And then we have to have a really realistic conversation with ourselves about how much we actually drink, both how frequently and how much we consume when we are drinking. Most of us are way underestimating how much we pour. So if you have to measure it out with a shot glass, 4 or 5 ounces each time you pour yourself a glass of wine, go for it. You'll gain a lot more awareness over time. And if you have to set rules with yourself about nights off from drinking, that can be helpful too. And certainly, as I spoke about only drinking high-quality alcohol without a lot of garbage in it, that makes a big difference as well. But more than anything, I believe the reason you're drinking and your intuitive feeling about whether you drink too much for your body and your life is important. If you feel like deep down you're drinking too much, then you probably are. And if you feel like your body isn't doing great in certain ways, drinking alcohol sure doesn't help with healing. But if you're doing okay health-wise and love to share a glass or two of delicious wine with your spouse or great friends in a way that doesn't seem like a dependency or a coping mechanism, then you're living like a Sardinian, which is one of the 5 blue zones. And they really embrace community and family support, and wine is a daily affair. Lastly, as with everything you do, practice radical acceptance with your drinking habits. At the time of recording this, I'm a mom of a nearly 15-month-old, and let me tell you, some nights after a wild experience of him throwing food at me and bedtime being really emotionally exhausting, I melt into a glass of wine, and I'm definitely using it as a coping mechanism in that situation, or at the very least, a reward. And yes, I'll sometimes have one even alone after the same bedtime insanity when my husband's traveling. I'm not here to tell you what I've done is okay or not okay, but I'm accepting that I don't always make the best decisions for my body around alcohol, but I try to do better every day. Beating yourself up or feeling a lot of shame doesn't change your behavior. It just makes you miserable, and it probably makes you drink more. Radical acceptance of your choices and behavior, and then making better ones, is all we can do as human beings. So that's all for today. To read the written version of this guide with plenty of research links, head to getwellbe.com or check out the links in the show notes. And while you're there, definitely become a Wellbe Insider to get our latest content weekly sent to your inbox. If you haven't already and found this episode helpful or interesting, subscribe to the Wellbe podcast. This way you'll never miss a new episode, and they'll be delivered to you whenever we publish a new one. And please share this episode with family or friends who you think might find it valuable and informative. It means a lot and helps more people find the podcast. If you love the Wellbe podcast, please leave a quick review. It really helps with search. And if you already have, then thank you so much. I really appreciate it. This is your host, Adrienne Nolan-Smith, and thanks again for listening to the Wellbe podcast.